Okay, guys, I'm just going to look at the homework from 6.4, parallel and perpendicular lines. So we jump from 6.1 to 6.4 because 6.4 I think is pretty straightforward. But because of that, there is a little part of the homework where I don't want you to try to rearrange equations. So we'll just stick to the homework that I assigned 3, 4, and 5, and we should be great. So here are the answers here. So as I find my textbook here, give me a second. 6.4, we're looking at what makes a line parallel or a line perpendicular to another line. So parallel lines don't meet because they have the same slope, like we said in the video, and perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So if you look here for number 3, you're asked, are they parallel or are they perpendicular? So I'd like to use those signs for parallel and perpendicular. Up and down, 2 lines up and down are parallel, and then 2 that meet at a right angle are perpendicular. Or are they neither? So if you look at the first example, we have here the first 2 slopes are 2/3 and 4/6. And initially you might look at that and say, well, they're not the same and they're not negative reciprocal, so they're not, so it's neither. But if you know that 2/3 in lowest terms, sorry, 4/6 in lowest terms is 2/3, then the 2 lines do have the exact same slope, so therefore they're parallel. Okay, so that's that question, a little tricky. The next one is a straightforward perpendicular line. 3/4 flipped is 4/3, and then throw the negative in there, right? So you need to change, if the slopes are flipped versions of each other with negatives, then they are perpendicular. 2 and -2 are neither, okay? So 2 is not the same as -2, so they're not the same. They're not parallel. And then the negative reciprocal of 2 is 1/2 negative. So negative 1/2, not -2, so the answer here is neither. This one's tricky. I wrote tricky here. And the reason D was tricky with 1 and -1 as your slopes is that right away you go, well, okay, sure, it's negative, right? But it's not the reciprocal, so it's not perpendicular. But if you actually, when you have a whole number, right? So this came up in the note, but if you have a whole number, so if the slope was 2, like I had earlier, and you want the negative reciprocal, it's 1/2, and then throw a negative in front of it, right? So that's the negative reciprocal. Now, if you take 1 and you say 1/1 and throw a negative in front of it, you end up with negative 1/1, which is actually -1. So in this case, and only in this case where you have 1 as your initial value, the negative reciprocal is actually a whole number. Okay, so a tricky question. It's perpendicular. If you didn't get it, I wouldn't feel too bad. And then this one here, the last question, E. Don't do F. Well, sorry, do F. But look at E. Sorry, not the last question. E, 1/5 is actually 0.2. So that they're the same. So that's wrong. My answer here is wrong. I know I wrote this. If they're the same, 1/5 and 0.2 are the same. Therefore, they're parallel. Okay, so those 2 are parallel. F, 2 1/4 versus -4/9. So what's up with that? Well, we're gonna have to change this to a improper fraction. So 2 1/4 is 9/4. So how does 9/4 relate? 9/4 relate to -4/9. Well, they're negative reciprocals of each other. Flip the 4 and the 9 and make it negative. Okay, so that is question 3. Give me 1 second. I just want to check something here on our class. So question, yeah, so at this point here, you can go and mess around with Desmos. There's a Desmos video that I posted, and you can use Desmos to help you with all this stuff, so that's great. In 4, what's the slope of the line that's parallel to each of these? All you're going to do here is just take the slope here, so 3/5 is 3/5, and this one here, just be careful, in 4b, that the slope of this equation, y equals -x plus 7, is -1, so that parallel lines have the same slope, so -1 is -1. Perpendicular lines, 3/5 gets flipped to -5/3, and again, this -1, just like above, -1 over 1, and then make it negative. So there's 2 negatives here. So if you go 1, let me just show you how I got this here. you go 1 over negative 1. Okay, so you flip that and then you make it negative. There's 2 negatives. Doesn't matter where you put the negatives, but there are 2 in the fraction. They cancel each other out, and your answer is plus 1. Okay, so that one's a little tricky. I wouldn't worry too much about these 1s and negative 1s. Just really focus on this stuff here. Okay, can you flip a fraction and make it change the sign? That's perpendicular, and then if they're the same, it's parallel. All right, more on this stuff. This does come up as we move on through the course, so kind of an easy unit, but have this in the back of your mind as we move forward tomorrow and the next day. All right, take care.